Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Read M. My name is Emily and today I will be reading the book that Paul Mescal told me will make me cry. Yes, you heard that right. I met Paul Mescal somewhat recently, a few weeks, months ago, and I got Faux signed, which is one of my favorite books by one of my favorite authors. And when we were doing that, I started talking to him about this author, and I said I had read everything he had written and that I loved him so much, and he was like, oh my god, he's brilliant, and I was like, I know. And then I said, actually, I kind of just lied to you, I haven't read his new one yet, because I'm scared it's gonna make me cry. And he said, oh, don't read it, you will cry. But then he said, but do read it, because you need to. I'm gonna listen to him, obviously. I've had this book since it came out, and I've been terrified of it because I know the themes of it are what I'm terrified of. It's about a woman who lives in an old person home, and I think her mind is gonna start deteriorating. That's all I need to know. I'm scared, I'm excited. Let's get into the video. I apologize for the atrocity of this lighting, but I simply will not be moving because I already got to part 2 of this book. And I already know that Iain Reid does not have my heart in mind. Like, he's not gonna hold back, and I'm not gonna be all right, and I'm gonna have to accept that now. I'm thinking of ending things. That messed me up. Faux messed me up a little bit less, but it messed me up. This is gonna just, I might be pulverized. And I have seen every single person who has read this book, even people who didn't like his other books as much, I have seen them just wrecked, just absolutely destroyed. And I don't know how I'm gonna survive, especially because this book, like his other ones, it's not really like a horror in the sense that like nothing specifically scary is happening, and it's very like literary, and there's no like blood and gore and whatever, but it takes like the core fears of the human experience and just spits them back out at you. This fear specifically is something that's going to terrify me. But I also know this is all going to be a metaphor for something else, or it's really all going to be something else, because that's what Iain Reid does. And I don't know what that is yet. I'm not sure I'm ready to know what that is yet. Reid always chooses to do something interesting and significant with the text itself. In this book, there are 2 devices, or 3 maybe in that way, where the paragraphs are like separated by spaces and they're not indented, which is like, I know that's deliberate, don't know why yet. Maybe it's to like symbolize thoughts being separated and disjointed. To be determined. There's also notes that she writes to herself, which I think will probably come back and mean different things in the future. And I need to keep reading. I'm on page 50. Haven't cried yet. Will I? I usually don't, but if anyone's gonna do it, Iain Reid is gonna do it to me. So, see you guys in my next update. Okay, I'm sorry, we're back at the worst angle ever created, but I'm back from the beach. We made some significant progress. We got to part 3, and there are some hints being laid. I don't want to really put spoilers in this video because I want anyone to be able to watch it, but if you know, you know. There are some hints being laid as to what this place might really be, but also it feels too obvious. It feels too obvious. Like, the hints being laid are very explicit, like they're leading you in one direction, and I just feel like Iain Reid would not, he never leads you in one direction and then just puts you there. There's much to ponder. I think I'm gonna finish it tonight. I'm over halfway. I'm on page 164, and these pages fly by because I like the spacing. So we're gonna read this right now. I might time-lapse some of me reading it in case things get crazy, but to be determined because I might get too into it. See you soon. I am so dumb, and this man is so smart. I just read one singular line that it literally just says, this is not a spoiler, this is literally just the name of the old person home. It just says, this house, he says, 6 cedars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Every couple pages I just sit there and stare into the distance because like I can't see the next update. We're getting dangerously close to the title reveal. It's not making me feel great. Oh, I can't do this. I knew that this is where we were going. But okay. 30 more pages. I'm underlining literally everything that's happening right now. Oh my god, my pen is not working because I'm reading upside down. You can't do this to me with this math and art metaphor combining. No, I just had an idea. I don't think I even want to think about this idea. I can't tell how much of this is like genuinely what Iain Reid believes and how much of it is like him trying to convince himself is true to feel better. And maybe I shouldn't think about that. Yeah, that last line. I knew that would be what he'd do. Oh. Oh no, there's more. Well, didn't cry. However, I can see why a normal person would. More thoughts to come in a much better angle, but just immediate impressions. This is what you think it's gonna be. It's what it has to be. It really reminds me of the movie The Father with Anthony Hopkins from a few years ago. That's really good. Very similar, honestly. Similar themes, similar execution. We're gonna need a few moments to process. I can't decide if this is my favorite Iain Reid or not. It could still be I'm thinking of anything, but that's also probably because it's the first one I read. I mean, this is perfect. This is exactly what it needs to be. And I would argue it's not sad. Well, it is scary. It is heavy. But is it sad? That's the question. Okay. More thoughts to come when I'm not laying like this. I am incredibly aware that I look insane. I'm currently still in pajamas. I just woke up. I fell asleep last night while I was reading. I woke up early and I had to finish the book. And I did, as you know by what you just saw. There's a lot we're gonna unpack here. First thing I need to say, if there's only one Iain Reid fan, I am that fan. I am there. I started with, I'm thinking of many things. We're just gonna give the lowdown now on me and Iain Reid. I started with this book. It messed up my life. I remember reading it so specifically in the office room of my house in one sitting, and the second I finished it, I went back to the beginning. The entire thing, every time he writes a book, the entire thing, it's not what you think it is. It's not what you think it is. Then the beginning of this year, I read Foe. This one, you know, I kinda saw the ending coming, but it's kind of the same deal where you're like, how am I so dumb? This whole time, this whole thing puts it in a new perspective. I need to read this entire thing again. Then I found out that it's gonna be a movie with Saoirse Ronan and Paul Mescal, and then I met Paul Mescal, and he signed my copy. And I said, well, I actually haven't read his last one, so I basically just lied to you. And he said, yeah, don't read that. You're gonna cry. But do read it, because you need to. Look, I also had fears of this book. You know, I've heard of this book for several years, because I follow everything this man does. And I knew this would exist. And I saw it pitched as a philosophical horror that had to do with, like, the themes it has to do with, which is, like, aging, death, old people. And I said, can I ever read that? I don't know. Because if we're going to the core of Emily Fears, this is the core of Emily Fears. If I had read this perhaps a year or two ago, it would not have been read. There would have been a mental breakdown. And so I'm pretty proud that this happened without a mental breakdown. And I do think that is because of some progress that has personally been made, but also because of the movie I was mentioning earlier, The Father, with Anthony Hopkins. That's a very good film. Very similar to this. If you are at all interested in putting yourself through this again, or something like this, or just maybe finding comfort in some other perspectives about these themes, I think The Father would be a good movie for you. Okay, I'm sorry that everything just moved, but my camera was dying and then I just wrote my entire review of this book, which I feel like maybe was actually a good thing because I feel like my thoughts are organized now, but I also feel like I conveyed them so much better written down than I possibly could out loud. So this might be shorter than I thought, and also worse than I thought. But I'm gonna attempt to hit the key points right now. The themes are gonna be talked about. And if that is a spoiler to you, then don't watch this part of the video. The plot points will not be talked about, and that's all I have to say about that. The first thing that I want to touch on here is that Iain Reid, as I was saying before, he writes books that are not about what you expect them to be about, and then because of the fact that I was expecting that, I think I was somehow left in the dark again about this. And that's all I'm gonna say about that. I don't want to delve into spoiler territory there, but I just will say this is not a carbon copy of all his other ones. This is great, and this is still something you should read even if you've read his other books. I also want to say that this is my favorite genre of anything, of book, of movie, of story, where it's literary, psychological, philosophical, but it's horror. Like, it's so scary. You don't know why you're so scared because nothing happens. Nothing happens. Nothing happens in anything he ever writes. It's literally always about one or two people and the inside of their brains. And they're probably just sitting down for the entire book. And yet you cannot put it down. Like, this is a thriller to me. And I don't think they leave the same building in the entire book. There's a lot of things being discussed, and I tried to boil this down in my review, which is that there's so much being discussed here that I have not clung on to all of it yet. Like, I think if I read it again, I read it at a different time, in a different context, I would take away something completely different. And right now, I think there are three main layers to the book and two that I personally really clung to. I think there's one deep layer about a commentary on how elderly people are perceived in society and how they are categorized as elderly people. It is like one entity, one unit, and there's kind of comparisons to the idea of like forests and lichen and, you know, things that spread that are one big living organism kind of thing. And that is a whole layer to this that I personally didn't dive as deep into upon this read that I think a lot of people will, and that I can in the future when I'm really into that more. But I think another central quote, sorry, this is really all over the place, but another central quote that stood out to me in this is that the only things that are scary are inescapable. And I think right now I can kind of escape that idea of the elderly collective kind of situation. I think that is the problem. I think that when people see old people, they want to escape having to confront that, so they ignore them and just like pretend that it's all one blanket thing. And unfortunately, I think I'm still at the phase of my life where I can ignore that, and I will ignore that, and I will escape that. But eventually I won't, and that's when it'll be scary. But for now it's not. The other two layers that I personally related to so much and just were impacted by in this book were, they both relate to the idea of infinity and eternity. That is like a big central thing here. And the two ways that that can be connected to me at the moment is the idea of moments being precious, of infinity rendering things worthless, because without an ending, things are meaningless. And this is what I was kind of mentioning before, that I can't tell if Iain Reid actually believes that or if he's just telling himself that to feel better. And maybe we shouldn't think too deeply about that. But I like the idea right now. And the parts that were like killing me in this is there's just so much about like goodbyes, about things ending, about saying goodbye to people, about moments mattering so much, about the present mattering so much, about endings mattering so much, and endings being the only reason why things are precious kind of thing. I'm not doing it justice. But having literally just gone through that with some of the best people I've ever met, it was just a personal attack. It was just personal attack. Like, I don't even think that's what he's talking about here. Like, he's talking about life. He's not talking about, like, goodbyes. He's not talking about leaving people, like, literally, like, in life, but it somehow applies to that. And then that, again, ties into the idea of infinity, because I think this book has infinite interpretations, but it's also a finite text. Like, this book ends. This book ends. But it will not end in my mind. Like, I could read this again and again and again and never take away the same thing. There are so many, like, little outlets that you could go down that it is infinite, which kind of goes against everything that he's saying, but also not, because we have a finite text. This is getting a little bit too meta for some people, I'm very sure, but this is just, he does this to me. I don't know how to explain it. And the last thing I need to say that literally had me deceased, had me on the ground, is that if any book or anything, any story thing ever, literally ever, including the book that I'm writing, once you connect math with art, humanities, life, philosophy, anything, once you connect math with literally anything like emotional, I'm on the ground. I'm not okay. There was so much stuff in here about fractions, simplifying fractions. Also, fractions are a sore subject for me because just, Brianna, you know who you are. There was also this whole quote about Goldbach's conjecture, which I don't even know if I've heard of that before, but once he explained it and once it was connecting to the quote that he said, like, if you read, you know. If you know, you know. And I'm not gonna ruin that moment for anyone, but like, just Hilbert, the math guy, like, you can't do that to me in a book and expect me to be okay. And I don't think that part is gonna impact some people the same way it did to me. Like, I think that it's not even that profound of a statement. Like, I've seen it before, but anytime you do that to me, I'm not gonna be alright. So, all in all, this is a 5-star book. My favorite book of the year so far, obviously, but I've barely read anything because I was gone for this whole semester, but I will be reading a lot this summer. Like, don't worry, because once we start with this, there's no stopping it. I need the next thing he writes. I need it now. Maybe not now. Maybe I shouldn't have it now, but I do need it soon, and I hope he announces it soon, and I will be reading it, even if it's literally his grocery list. With that being said, I have to give a formal thank you to Paul Mescal for forcing me to read this, because I was terrified of reading it, and his encouragement actually got me to read it very soon. So, thank you. You all too, if you're still watching. I don't know why you are listening to this rambling. Please read my actual review if you want to hear or read anything that actually makes sense about my thoughts on this. And maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe I'm just crazy. If you loved this book as much as I did, or if you want to love this book as much as I did, or if you're just interested at all, please give it a read because I worked hard on that. Anyway, thank you all for liking and commenting and subscribing. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!